OECD was looking for a raison d'etre to exist, and it was sick and tired of being called rich man's think tank. That's what it was called. And they were tired. In fact, they would always ask me, when are you getting in? And I would tell them, India will only get into OECD after China does. Because China is in a far more advanced country than India. So first China has to get in. But of course, since then we know that Brazil has applied. I don't know where that application is, but complicated, yes. So I can understand. But to go back to what Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia was saying, I think some of these things we just have to live with, because that's the nature of G20. But I have great pleasure in inviting the next speaker. And if Vish is a very dear friend, so I can take a few liberties. I think what is remarkable about Ambassador Vishwanathan's career is that he is senior to me, but I would still call him broadly my vintage. He is definitely senior to me by 4 years, but still my vintage. The point is, what I want to say is he was a pioneer because he was far ahead of the curve compared to the rest of us. While the rest of us were angling for postings to Geneva and New York, which was considered the Mecca of the Foreign Service, he chose a region which, and I want to pick up on a point made by Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, and he did not say it, he merely said that, sometimes Africa is better known than Latin America. That is Ambassador Bhatia at his diplomatic best. I could have put it much more strongly, but I will not. But what I want to say is that Ambassador Vishwanathan chose an area which is of interest to you, and sometimes in my class I say it, we still don't have enough Latin American experts. He is still the only one. There may be a couple of others, but so to kind of specialize in a region, knowing full well the ministry not only does not pay you credit, but sometimes penalizes you. He was fully aware of that. In spite of it, he told the ministry to go to hell and I'll do what I like. That is Ambassador Vishwanathan for you. A man who's truly, his own man, so to speak. At least that's the Vish I know. So Vish, thank you so much for your presence, because I was very, very keen to have him. Not that I was not keen to have the others, but it's important to get a Latin American perspective. Somebody who has lived there, somebody who has worked there. So it's with very great pleasure. You can either speak from the podium or I'll give you the mic. Okay, the podium. Thank you, Ambassador Vishwanathan.
Well, Mohan Kumar introduced me as a fellow Tamil. And then talked about my Latin America expertise. There is a Tamil book. The name in Tamil is Ten America Tamizhargal.
Oh.
It means South American Tamils. So according to this author called Navina Alexander, the Aztecs, Mayas, Incas, and Olmecs, they were basically Tamils. They went from Tamil Nadu about 3,000 years back. So I was amused by this. So I called him and said, I'm really surprised you have come out with a thesis like this. But he took me by surprise by saying that he's going to write another book in which he's going to say that South America was ruled by the Cholas. So Ambassador Kenneth, we the Tamils also practice magical realism like the Latin Americans. Mohan Kumar told me that the panelists can have freedom and speak their mind. I'm going to do that. I will go behind G20 and beyond G20, because G20 I consider as a mock game. It is not the final game. It is not the main course. It's a preliminary one. What does Brazil bring to this table of G20 as a trial, as a foretaste of what else it can bring to the main game going beyond G20. Now, among the G20 and among the major global players, Brazil stands out as an exceptional power with the least weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and sensitivities, and the most strategic strength, security, and soft power. Partly, this is God's gift, and partly, it is the work of the Brazilians. When Dilma Rousseff, when she was president, she went to Vatican to call on Pope Francis, who was an Argentine. So when she came out of the meeting, there was this Argentine journalist waiting eagerly to catch her and tease her, and said, "Madam, you had gone and called on Pope, who is an Argentine. You have anything to say?" She said, "Of course, we have great regard for Pope Francis, who is an Argentine." It's true, the Pope is Argentine, but the God is Brazilian. And God has blessed Brazil with abundant resources. Very large area, fertile area. They can bring another 20 million hectares of land without touching Amazon. They have 20% of the global freshwater resource. And they have got a moderate climate, free from extreme cold or heat, free from, not prone to any natural calamities like hurricanes or volcanoes or snowstorms or earthquakes, and beautiful beaches too. Now, what has the Brazilians done with this God's gift of this land and water? The Brazilians have made Brazil as a superpower in agriculture, agricultural powerhouse. Brazil has used the brilliant scientists of Embrapa, the Agricultural Research Institute, to bring land which was considered as uncultivable in Mato Grosso, Cerrado area, and made it as cultivable and increased productivity. Today, Brazil is the #1 exporter in the world of soya, corn, coffee, sugar, beef, and orange juice, among other commodities. They do large-scale commercial farming with innovation and scientific research done by Embrapa. Brazil has the capacity to feed another 500 million more people in the world. So, Brazil does not have an issue of food security like some of the G20 and major powers have. And they have energy security too. In fossil fuels, God has blessed Brazil with oil reserves, but He hid them under the sea, 5 kilometers under the sea, 5,000 meters. And the Petrobras engineers and scientists, they developed proprietary technology without going to Exxon Mobil or Total. They developed their own technology to do undersea drilling and production of oil under 5 kilometers in water. Today, Brazil is the largest producer of oil in Latin America. I'll blame the Yankees for putting down Venezuela with the sanctions. Otherwise, Venezuela should be #1. Brazil is a global leader and pioneer in biofuels. They have reduced the consumption of petrol by 50% by the use of ethanol made from sugarcane. Sugarcane ethanol is more efficient and less polluting than the corn ethanol of United States. Now, Brazil is the only country in the world where you have most of the cars have flexi fuel engines. It can run on 100% petrol, 100% ethanol, or any blend of that. You go to a petrol pump station, you have one pump which dispenses petrol, the other one dispenses ethanol. You can have your own mix. And they have the flexi factories where the sugarcane juice comes into the factory. If the price of sugar is good, they go this side to make sugar. If the price of ethanol is better, then go this side. So they have these flexi factories to make sugar and ethanol, which also help them to overcome the cyclical nature of agricultural commodities. They are also into renewable energy. Brazil gets a lot of its energy from renewable source. They have one of the largest hydroelectric dams in the world called Itaipu. Before Three Gorges, 14,000 megawatts. But they have tremendous potential to generate more hydroelectricity. And they have plenty of sun like India for solar energy. So Brazil has adequate food security and energy security, which is a problem for some of the members of G-20 and major players. Now, God has also given another blessing to them. You know, in Mexico, the Mexicans have a very sad saying. Poor Mexico, so far from God, so close to the gringos, close to United States. When one of the Mexicans crossed the border into America, the border agent, the American, said, "Mister, you have crossed the border." So this guy, the Mexican, looks at him and says, "Senor, I did not cross the border. The border has crossed me." Because 40% of Mexican territory has been grabbed by United States. 7, 8 states in the south, they were all originally Mexico. But God has blessed Brazil to be away from United States, away from the flashpoints of civilizational clashes, from troublemakers, imperialist powers. They are away, they are blessed. And Brazil is one country which has not fought a war on its own for the last 150 years. Brazil has border with 10 countries in South America. There is not a single border dispute. No border dispute. So the greatest challenge and problem for the armed forces of Brazil is to find an enemy. They don't know who the enemy is. In their military doctrine, they have been having this perpetual dilemma, puzzle. Who is the enemy? No one. And Brazil does not threaten anyone, and nobody is threatening Brazil. Brazil does not have weapons of mass destruction, but it has weapons of mass distraction. Football, Carnival, Samba, Bossa Nova, Copacabana, Ipanema, all mass distractions. Brazil has no historic baggage. They have no historic grievances or guilt. They have no blood in their hands, and they are not claiming anything from anyone. And I think they are the only country in the world who got independence because some people loved the beaches. You know the history of Brazil. When Napoleon invaded Portugal, the king of Portugal was smuggled into Brazil by the British. And after Napoleon's defeat, the king was brought back. But the crown prince stayed on in Rio de Janeiro. He liked Copacabana. And after the king died, the court in Lisbon called the crown prince. Come on, you have to come and take over. He said, sorry, I like Copacabana, I like Ipanema. So he declared independence. And Brazil is also free from the contemporary major issues which affect large powers like United States and Europe. Terrorism, fundamentalism, illegal immigration. Brazil doesn't have the problems. And unlike the Indians and the Chinese, the Brazilians don't immigrate to United States or Europe. They don't care. They are quite content and happy being in Brazil itself. The Brazilian economy is diversified. Strong agriculture, manufacturing, and services. Just to give you an example of what Brazil can do, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, HAL, and Embraer, the Brazilian company, they were started around the same time. In fact, HAL was a bit earlier, started as government companies. Bangalore has a better ecosystem of engineers and scientists than San Jose dos Campos, of where the Embraer is located. But today, Embraer is the third largest passenger plane maker after Boeing and Airbus. And HAL is behind. And the Brazilian economy is not dependent on any single commodity for trade on any single country. No. They have enough agriculture, industry, manufacturing, and if tomorrow there are sanctions, they will happily survive. There's another issue in some of the major countries: separatism, ethnic conflicts, religious conflicts, linguistic conflicts. Brazil is free from these. They speak one language and one religion. Brazil is the largest Catholic country in the world. So, but I think more than asking for a permanent membership of Security Council, they should also insist that the Pope should be Brazilian. You have the largest population of Catholics in the world. And the Brazilians are happy-go-lucky people, cheerful, and they're soft power. If tomorrow you have a vote in the United Nations, whom do you like more? The gringos or the Russians or many others? The Brazilians will get the most votes. Adorable, cheerful people. Now, with all these attributes of the least weaknesses and the most strength and security, Brazil has the capacity to practice objective foreign policy. Whereas when you mention K word, Indian delegate gets up. When you mention P word, well, there is a right of reply from India. Now, Brazil doesn't have any of those sensitive spots. So they can speak freely and fearlessly on multilateral issues. But more than everything else, Brazil is one country which can take on United States and tell them in their face what should be told to them. And they have done it. After 9/11, when the Americans made all of us stand in the queue, do fingerprinting, photograph, the only country which retaliated to this was Brazil. They put all the Americans in one queue and they got a very old camera, very old fingerprint system, made them stand for hours together. And when all the American pilot did this one, they put him in jail. They are the only country from the global south who can stand up to United States and speak their mind. So I was talking to one of my old Brazilian friends who works with the Jay Shankar of Brazil, Celso Amorim. Sorry for this comparison. Celso Amorim is one of the wisest foreign ministers of the world. How do they manage United States these days? So he told me a story. He said there was a oil tycoon from Texas. He visited Rio de Janeiro and fell in love with a girl from Ipanema. Married her and took her to Houston. And after reaching there on the first day evening, he told her, I must tell you the 3 rules of marriage of Texas. So she said, Si, senor, go ahead. He said, rule number 1, I'm the boss. Rule number 2, whatever I do, I go out and come back in the night at 3 o'clock, or I go for soccer, or no questions. Si, senor. Third, whenever I come home at 2 or 3 in the morning, there should be food ready, warm, on the table, and you should be there to serve me. She said, Si, senor, no problem. Then he asked, now that I have told you the 3 rules of marriage of Texas, you want any clarification or you any comments? You want to say something? She said, since you put these 3 rules of Texas, I want to put one Brazilian rule for this. Small one rule. What is that? You see that bedroom there? There will be sex every night at 10 o'clock, whether you are there or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Wish you lived up to your billing and reputation and everything else, expectation. I think there is a master class on Brazil, and the best tribute you can get is on a couple of occasions I saw the Brazilian ambassador take notes. So I don't think you can get a better, certificate than that. No, but more seriously, the wish when I come back to you, a lot of it was, of course, news to me, and I'm sure to the students as well. How can we get some of these? Obviously, God has not blessed India. I saw the Chinese delegation also taking notes about how they can deal with the United States, which makes a lot of sense, my friends. Please learn from Brazil. Yes, you will do well to take notes. But jokes aside, I want to understand, some things, of course, India is not blessed, and let's be honest about it. But can we at least share some of this amazing technology that you talked about? Whether it is ethanol, biofuels, or it is about, Brazil, the Embraer story. HAL you don't get me started. My blood pressure will go up once you mention HAL because I've had occasions to deal with them in Paris. So I think when I come back to you, maybe you can tell us very frankly, can this technology be shared by Brazil with India? That is one thing. The second thing is, I don't want to be a party pooper because what you said about Brazil is absolutely correct. And yet, 20, 25 years ago at least, I would hear about Brazil being a very unequal society. And I want to ask you, there's so much that God has given, Brazilians themselves have achieved. What is the reason for this inequality? And I know it has reduced because now I think it could be argued that India is more unequal than Brazil. At least that's what I learned from the Oxfam report. But I want you to tackle these two. One, how we can use is not the right word, but we can benefit from the Brazilian G-20 presidency by getting some of this amazing appropriate technology rather than go for Rolls-Royce technology. What we need is technology which Brazil, of course the Brazilian climate is nowhere near India, so that's a problem. We have a climate also which is horrible. But anyway, be that as it may, if we can benefit. The second is, how do you explain then the bit of the inequality? In a country that is so blessed, I think, if you don't mind my saying it, they should have been a much more equal society, isn't it? So those are the two questions I have for you, not now, but please think about it in the next round. I now turn to, you've heard from two ex-diplomats, and ex-diplomats, of course, have their own perspective on issues, but it would also be interesting to hear a completely academic perspective, if you allow me. Professor Anshu Joshi, who spent a lot of time, she's associate professor, she heads the Center for Latin Americans. No, you're not the head. I'm just saying you are with the Center of Latin American Studies. You've worked hard on Brazil. That is a subject that you know and it's close to your heart. So it'll be wonderful to hear from you. And the only challenge you have perhaps, and then we can ask the others also to comment on it, is what are the potential outcomes from your knowledge of Brazil? And you have now heard from Ambassador Vishwanathan as well what Brazil is capable of bringing to the table. What can we expect in these three areas that the ambassador talked of, three priorities? What can we expect in terms of potential outcomes? So that's the challenge for you, but please feel free. The floor is yours.